All right, Chairwoman Floyd Huggins, you have the floor.
Good morning. Okay, good morning again. Welcome, and I welcome all of you to the CIP planning workshop for Pitt County, and I call the Pitt County Commissioners CIP planning workshop to order. Madam Clerk.
Good morning. Yes, Chairwoman Floyd Huggins.
Yes.
Vice Chair Fitzpatrick.
Yes.
Commissioner Albright.
Yes.
Commissioner Colson.
Yes.
Commissioner McLawhorn.
Yes.
Commissioner Nunley.
Yes.
Commissioner Ward.
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins Williams.
You.
Everyone is present with the exception of Commissioner White.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
At this time, I'd like to make a motion to excuse Commissioner White from today's meeting.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we excuse Commissioner White. Madam Clerk.
Chairwoman Floyd Huggins.
Yes.
Vice Chair Fitzpatrick.
Yes.
Commissioner Albright.
Yes.
Commissioner Colson.
Yes.
Commissioner McLawhorn.
Yes.
Commissioner Nunley.
Yes.
Commissioner Ward.
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you again, Madam Clerk. At this time, we will have purpose from County Manager Scott.
Thank you, Chairwoman Floyd Huggins. Well, welcome to the CIP workshop, our capital improvement workshop for the planning for fiscal year 21-22. This workshop is really the first formal building block with the Board of Commissioners toward developing the new budget for July 1, again for 2021-2022. Obviously, this format is in Zoom, so it's a little bit different. Normally, we're down at the EOC, staff is kind of together, and we're can kind of look at each other and eyeball what we're doing. But obviously, we're in a virtual environment, so we are going to make it virtual and go through this workshop virtually. So the format of this is really pretty much identical to what we've done in years past. In terms of the purpose, you've got two things. You've got a PowerPoint, a printed PowerPoint, and you also have the printed notebook. The printed notebook has all the information that is in the PowerPoint as well. The notebook has an index page by page with information, and maybe even it's larger information via compared to what's in the PowerPoint with tables, so you can read it a little bit clearer. In terms of the purpose, the goal today, or the agenda, is to discuss and adopt one thing being the county's mission, vision, values, and goals statement for the new year. This is the statement that is in the current year for 2021. We're also going to do a review of the budget drivers as we see them right now in the budget outlook to July 1. And then most importantly is to review and discuss the capital planning needs of Pitt County and those major institutions that we are responsible for funding, being outside institutions, being the community college and the Pitt County school system. So moving on to our review of the mission, vision, values, and goals. Basically, we need to have a review of this and then just ask the board either to make suggestions to amend these statements or to reaffirm them and adopt them so we can set them forth as the foundation toward building the budget for coming before you in the budget workshops. Then that will be eventually, hopefully, adopted by you for the new year beginning July 1. So our mission statement, as you can see on the bottom of page 2 of the PowerPoint printout, and I think we should be displaying this on the screen as well. I assume Brian or our PO office should have that up there.
Brian, you should see a share screen function at the bottom of your screen.
Here we go.
I think done something.
Okay, so there we go. So if we can move on to the next slide. And next slide, there we go. All right, so the mission of Pitt County government is to enhance the health, safety, well-being of our community by advocating for and providing quality services in a friendly and cost-effective manner. This mission statement has served the organization for many, 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 many years and has really been the foundation of what we do and one of our guiding principles. So if we can move on to next.
Yeah.
Unless there's any comments on the mission statement.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to know if we can add to everyone.
I'm sorry, what do you want to add?
To everyone.
So I guess you could say add it into the health, safety, and well-being for everyone in our community by advocating?
No, at the very end. At the very end. To everyone. With such a play of words and everything else in national media, become a little paranoid, I guess, but to everyone will be good.
Do we need Ms. Manager, do we need a motion on?
Yes, you'll need a motion and then a second and then a vote if you're going to change your mission statement.
Madam Chairwoman, I'd like to add at the end of the sentence, to everyone. I offer that as a motion.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second? Do I have a second?
Any hands up or any, I don't see it.
Yeah, because I can't see it.
I can't either.
So,
With the screen share, we can't see if there's hands up.
Scott,
PO
currently there are
office, you can
no
help
hands
us.
up at this time.
Pardon me?
okay, so it dies for lack of a second.
All right, so then moving on. And can I just make a comment on the mission statement? I think when it says the well-being of our community, it could be implied that when we say our community, that's the community as a whole. So I just wanted to make a comment. I believe that the mission statement implies that. It may not say to everyone directly, but it does imply that. So next slide on the vision, a leader in the state, best in the East. And again, that is the vision statement that has served us for several decades and is another one of our core principles in terms of how we see ourselves. And we try to be that leader in the state and the best in the East to the best of our ability and resources. And I believe we've done a very good job of that. Any no comments on that, I assume. On values, we have the following value statements. We say that we believe that the government believes our purpose is public service. Thus, we'd adhere to the following. We encourage honest behavior that is consistent with our mission, recognize and promote competence, excellence, and open communication, support each other in working toward our goals, maintain an open government that is a good steward of public resources, support decision-making that is deliberate, conscientious, and based on fact. So again, our value statements. Excuse me, the priorities are based on these type of building blocks. You've got this is an illustration. The next slide will go into actual expanded wording in these, but education is the top building block of a priority. Then second is public safety. Third is economic development, human services, facility and space needs, infrastructure improvements, and recreational activities. So these are all priorities of the board as discussed and adopted in the past. So then to build upon that, the statements that go with each of these, the first one, education, to ensure quality education. Second one being public safety, to ensure community safety through enhanced emergency service programs. Next one, economic development, to advance economic development opportunities for Pitt County. Next one, human services, to enrich the quality of life for Pitt County citizens through opportunities for improved health, welfare, and environmental concerns. Then on capital improvements, to address the facility and space needs of all county government programs, general government, public schools, and community college. And next, capital improvements again, to champion infrastructure improvements throughout the county. And then we have cultural and recreational to support the provision of and access to recreational activities for county citizens. So with that, that is your mission, vision, values, and goals. And we would like the board's consideration to hopefully maybe have a motion to reaffirm those so we can adopt those into the budget planning process that we are embarking upon at this moment with all the departments.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I'd like to make a motion that we accept this review and as we have reaffirmed the mission, the vision, and the vision and goals.
thank you. Can I have a second?
Second that.
Okay. Are you about to say something, Scott?
No, ma'am.
Okay. It's been moved in second that we reaffirm the mission statement, vision, value, and goals for 21-22. These are very important. So, Madam Clerk.
Yes, ma'am.
Before roll call, I didn't mean to interrupt. I believe you may have a hand up on your participant list. I don't know if you wanted any discussion.
Okay, I can't see any hands, so.
If I click on my participant list on the bottom, it looks like Commissioner McLawhorn has his hand up.
Okay, Commissioner McLaughlin, do you want to make a statement or were you trying to make a second? Commissioner McLaughlin?
Yes, I was going to make a second.
All right, thank you. Madam Clerk?
Chairwoman Floyd Huggins,
Yes.
Vice Chair Fitzpatrick,
Yes.
Commissioner Albright,
Yes.
Commissioner Colson,
Yes.
Commissioner McLawhorn,
Yes.
Commissioner Nunley,
Yes.
Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Mr. Manager?
Yes, ma'am. And if I can ask Janice, if you and the other staff will continue to monitor the hands up. I think all the chair and I are seeing our person speaking and then the main screen with the PowerPoint
Right.
on it. So that help us if you let us know their hands up for questions or
That's
unless
all.
somebody just speaks up.
I will.
All right, in terms of budget planning, if we can move to the next slide. So for the upcoming spring calendar, we talk about the remaining budget calendar because technically we kicked this process off with the departments back in the fall, late fall, I think it's October, when we sent out the request for capital needs for them to do all their documentation. That builds up to this workshop. We basically start the process over every year internally. This whole package of projects is reviewed by management team in much detail through numerous meetings until we finally get to this presentation time before you. So it's to let you know that there's been a lot of preparation just to bring this package to you each year at this point in time. But in terms of what's left on the remaining budget calendar as we march toward the spring and then the adoption of the budget, hopefully in June, you have today's workshop. You have March 5th. We will have all the budget requests from the departments will be due. Those packages will be going out in the very near future. Then March 5th through the 26th, we have what we call budget compilation and balancing. That's done by finance internally, where they basically put all the pieces of the puzzle together, all the from the expenditure side to the revenue side, find out how far out of balance we are, and we are always out of balance because there's always so much more in demand, in need that is documented compared to the available resources. The 29th through April 9th, then we have the department heads and outside agencies come in, confer with me, Brian Barnett, and Denise and Kelly in terms of a budget conference to better fully understand what they've put in their budget, why they're asking for it, what their justification is, and then trying to figure out how we make that piece of the puzzle fit the bigger piece of the puzzle in terms of having our overall revenues meet those expenditures, or basically telling them why something cannot be funded at a certain point in time and may have to be deferred. We then have from April 30th, revised budget requests submitted to the departments for review. So we send them back once the budget conferences are done, send them back an indication as to what my recommendation will be to you as a board of commissioners, gives them one last chance to come back before me or Brian and ask for reconsideration or ask for an explanation before it's actually then becomes on the May 3rd date, the next day, my recommended budget and budget message that I present to you. And at that point in time, the staff bring before you what we call a balanced budget. Absolutely. If I wouldn't bring a balanced budget, then we would be starting the process off kilter and not having the revenues meet the expenditures. May 4th through the 6th, we'll have the budget workshops with you to allow us the time to present and review the recommended budget before you with all the planned expenditures, the anticipated revenues, and the whole budget picture. So that is the week of May the 4th. We always hold the second week of May the 10th, or that second week following the first week, May 10th through 14th, open for additional workshops. Those have been rarely, if ever, needed. We may have once have went into a second week, but for the most part, we were able to hear from you, understand whether you are in agreement to the recommended budget, where the tweaks should be made, and bring it back. A lot of times we'll bring this back to you in a regular meeting rather than actually coming back for another workshop. Right now we have the June 8th date on the calendar, which is scheduled for the public hearing. And that is normally, I think it used to be at 7. We may have switched that to 6 o'clock on that time, but it will be on June the 8th, the evening, June the 8th. And then we have an alternative date to that in case you were not to, sometimes if there's limited or no public comment, you have that option of adopting the budget that night. If there is public comment, you can still adopt it. But if you decided to defer the budget adoption, you could then wait until June the 21st to consider adopting it. The important thing is that you adopt it before July 1 to be in compliance with state statute. So with all that said, we'll move on unless there's any questions on the budget calendar. Are there any hands up for Janice?
I'm sorry, no hands up.
Okay, thank you. All right, in terms of budget drivers, probably none of this really comes as much a surprise, but the COVID impact. So right now we are looking at instability in sales tax revenues. It's up, it's down, it's for the most part, to be truthful, in this current fiscal year, we have done pretty well. We really have not taken a large hit on sales tax. We really thought going into this with the lockdown and so forth, the stay-at-home orders, we really thought that sales tax, which is one of our probably number 2 revenue source within the general fund, was really going to take some hits. We really didn't. When we did our projections in the new year, we really held things flat. Didn't go for much growth. But we've I think as of maybe last month, Brian, we were maybe just a couple $100,000 down, and that's out of I don't know, this off my head, $22-23 million revenue source. So we're really tracking pretty well on sales tax revenues. In terms of interest earnings, negligible, just due to what the interest earning environment is yielding out there. 10 years ago, we were probably earning 4% or greater right now, which yielded in probably close to, at one point, we were yielding a penny on the tax rate in terms of actual investment earnings on the tax dollars that came in until they had to be expended out, either for debt service or for payroll and such. But right now we're earning probably less than 0.25%. less than 1/4% on investment earnings. It's just the nature of the investment environment right now. The health of the workforce with COVID, as you remember, the federal government required us to offer 2 weeks of emergency bonus leave last year that would expire technically on December 30th or 31st. You as a Board of Commissioners said that if an employee had not used those by the end of the year, that they could be continued on into this current year and be used for COVID or non-COVID purposes. I think probably about a third of our workforce has pulled those hours down, had to use those either for any number of COVID considerations, even either the employee getting COVID, having to quarantine because they may have COVID, had childcare issues, so on and so forth. As we move forward, that one is still something we're wrangling with. I know health has had health department, sheriff, and all the departments I think have had issues of employees needing to be out quarantined, recovering from being sick. Probably more effect in some areas than others, just depending upon the operation. Another budget driver is the effects of the deferred capital projects from a year ago. So a year ago, when we sat in the workshop in the EOC, discussed all the capital projects, we had a lot of projects on the agenda on the CIP, i.e., such as the Sheriff's Administration Building. That was a project that we were going to move forward on in July 1 of last year. Then COVID hit. By the time we got into March and April and May, we realized we didn't really know where we were going in terms of overall revenues. So a lot of the projects we then brought back to you in the budget process and said, we really feel like we need to defer these a year until, say, now, because we didn't want to embark upon a bunch of projects, then find out that our revenues would not be sufficient to meet the debt service on those costs, or whether they're coming from fund balance or sales tax or not. So a lot of those projects are kind of being brought back for your consideration now, a year later, that we put off due to COVID. Next driver is one you see year to year, trying to maintain the current levels of service. Our fund balance levels and utilization, we're doing good there. We are maintaining a fund balance within your stated goal, and I think you'll see some good news on that when we come back on February the 15th with the audit from June 30th of 2020 in terms of the audit presentation and where fund balance is at that point in time. So being in the middle of a pandemic, we are strong financially. I would say on the property sales tax collections, we're good on sales tax collections. We're good on your fund balance percentage and utilization. So it's still a budget driver, because if that is spent down, it then means that at times like we have now, if, let's say for instance for the vaccine administration to vaccinate people, if we had to depend upon fund balance entirely, we could do that. And at some point we actually may be doing that, depending upon the response from the federal government in terms of providing dollars for this cost, because right now there are no dollars for that, i.e. that's one good reason to have a good strong fund balance for such cases like that, as well as hurricanes and so forth. Another budget driver you're going to hear more about later on will be the school capital needs and county funded school personnel needs. The school capital needs is the one that the county statutorily is mandated to provide for the brick and mortar construction of both the community college and Pitt County schools. The personnel in terms of supplements, that's not mandated. That's more of an option. But I think you're going to hear today is about capital needs. I'm sure you'll hear come the springtime on the personnel needs from the school system. The next budget driver, the national economy, just as we all monitor with a new president and administration in place to see where things go. In that respect, we'll be making budget recommendations based upon reading that and looking at how stable we think things are moving forward and so forth. And the last one is your unknown. we don't know. With COVID seems to be ever evolving with the different various strains that we are now hearing about, the more aggressive coronavirus strains. I really wish we had the original strain. We had that vaccine that was being given to people, and we were coming out of it. But we still have this unknown, not really knowing where it's headed in the big picture. So those are the budget impacts that we are facing. In terms of fund balance impacts, credit rating is the most important. We are going to be going before the 3 major credit bureau ratings in New York. I think it's in maybe February, March, and we will have to do a formal presentation for each of those in order to have our credit rating hopefully reaffirmed by them. That credit rating then will determine the amount of interest rate that we pay on all of our debt. And if you're paying 20, 25 years on debt, obviously you want to have the lowest interest rate that you can get, so it's cost effective. So interest rate on future debt is alluded to that. Cash flow, alluded to that earlier about needing that for emergency situations, whether it be hurricanes, whether pandemics such as the coronavirus and so forth. The fund balance is needed for stability, investment income, and then cash for emergencies. Again, this kind of all flows with what I've already stated. All right, so before we move into the next part of the workshop, which would be, I'm going to turn it over to Brian, wanted to ask Chairwoman Wood-Huggins if there's any questions on what I've presented so far in this workshop.
No, I don't have any question, Scott. And Janice, do we have any raised hands?
We do not.
Okay, thank you, and we'll move on.
All right, I will jump in and start the capital improvement process. As I'm moving through this, I can't see the raised hands either, so we're going to do it old school. So if you will just, I can, with my 2 screens, I can actually see you all and the presentation at the same time. So if anyone does have a question, you can raise your hand or unmute yourself, just jump in. We do have staff on the call, and staff are primarily going to be here if you have a very specific question about a project. But for the most part, the project discussion, I'm going to kind of go through. So with our capital improvement process, these are all items that are $100,000 or more. I know in our heads, when we hear the word capital, there's other items that come to mind, but if they don't quite meet that $100,000 threshold, it's not part of this particular process, and it's going to be captured more in the budget process in March. We do put them all together and for our list. And our list really gets revised and reviewed several times before we get to today with my staff, Kelly and Denise, Tim Corley on the engineering side, and then we bring in management team. So we have at least 3 sit downs before we get to what you see today and putting our list together. As part of the process, we review it here in January, and then we touch on it again in May. And then the final CIP for this year is adopted as part of the budget. One thing I always want to point out, because I always run into this process or run into this conversation during the budget process. You all today hopefully will adopt the CIP in general, but ultimately the CIP comes down to funding, which is adopted in June. So an item may make the CIP today, it may make it at a certain amount today, but as we go through the budget process in June, we may have to defer it, or we may have to reduce the amount that we have in the CIP. So this is really the starting gate of the projects. It's not the final gate until we get to the budget approval. And even in some cases, there will be specific approvals that will have to be approved by you all as a board before we can start a project down the road. So on our recommended projects, I'll cut to the chase for the most part, which is part of our review. And I think just doing this enough times with our departments, there's pretty much all of our projects from a management team, from an engineering standpoint, we are recommending. We're still going to go through them all. There is one project at the very end that you will see. It's kind of recommended. It's kind of not. It's in an unusual place dealing with the animal shelter, but we'll go into all that. So the first list that we have here is our general government and public safety. And what I'm actually going to do is later in the presentation, there's actually a breakdown of all of our projects. So I'm actually going to hit on each individual project then, but this just gives you an overview of what's just in the upcoming 21-22 list of projects. The second part of that grouping, public safety continues. You can see overall on our environmental, economic and physical development, our human services projects. On the education list here, these are the county-funded capital projects. You will get a full-on presentation from Pitt County Schools and Pitt Community College that will go into further detail. That will be larger numbers than this, but this is our capital 1, 2, and 3 that we fund each year as part of the budget. They're going to give you more detail about the specific projects that we typically fund outside of the general fund that do have larger dollar amounts. And then finally, economic development, which is primarily solid waste. So in all, for just 21-22, we're looking at about $6,293,159 in projects. So you should have your binder with you, and the binders pretty much follow along with the presentation if you want to read more in detail or want to make notes about any particular project. But I'm just going to start at the very top with general government. Everything that is 21-22 will be highlighted with the yellow column. We always include the future years so you can see that your upcoming obligations for projects, or if they're a project that is an annual project like our first one, which is our annual vehicle replacement project. 21-22 will be our cash funded year. Historically, we have gone 2 years. It's a 3-year cycle, with the first 2 years being that we go out and we get a small loan for vehicles. And then our third year is the cash funded year. In this case, it's $150,000 for next year. If you look out into future years, you will see that the loan year do escalate when we start our next cycle, and our next cash funded year, which is 24-25, does increase from $150,000 to $200,000 on our vehicle loans, vehicles. As part of the process, we meet with all of our departments. They meet with John Demery to come up with their list of what's priority and that we would like to be replaced. And then once we get into the fiscal year, we go out and we try to get the best price, which is typically on state contract for our vehicles. Our next project is our facility maintenance. This is another one of those annual ongoing projects that we have. Obviously, you've been in our facilities, whether they were new or old, they always need some type of love. In this case, for 21-22, it was $210,000. This is primarily going to be additional roof repair, HVAC, and carpet replacement. This is one of those projects that typically through the budget process in the spring, we do tend to tweak these numbers around depending on maybe there's enough money left over this year for a project that we can go ahead and knock out. So that number, that 210 may come down, or the 210,000 may come down because simply put, we just don't have enough funding in place to fund everything that we'd like to see in our CIP. Going into future years, this number is pretty consistent across the board, 300, 275, and 275. But these are our ongoing facility needs. Oops, jump one, sorry. Our next project is our 100,000 that we have put in for building safety. Our risk manager, Chris Barnes, has an ongoing list of projects, and the 100,000 is going to be used primarily for access points, cameras, or any other safety needs that may come up. This is a continuation of some prior year larger projects. That's why at this point we don't have anything in future years. But I would anticipate when we get to next year's CIP, we will still have some safety needs. So I would anticipate over the next 5 years, a couple of those years, we'll have some more projects.
Hey, Brian,
Yes.
on the one before that, the Pitt County Office Building renovation study, you may have skipped that one. There's $100,000 in there. And that is to do an evaluation of the Pitt County Office Building in terms of to see, is it cost effective to renovate this building or to look at other options? We had a lot of detailed discussion last year in the CIP workshop. And this is one of those projects that we were going to do in the current fiscal year. But again, due to the COVID concerns on revenues and so forth, we pushed this off. So we're back a year later. So the concept on this is to study this building, see if we can, how cost effective and efficient it would be to stay in this building, renovate it, or would the study yield we need to do something else, whether on the site, whether in Uptown, or whether north of the river at the office park. There's a number of options. But just wanted to point that one out.
So Scott, so where are we at in this study?
Well, again, it was not included. We were supposed to do it pre-COVID when we were developing the budget. COVID came. This is one of those projects, just like the Sheriff's Office Administration Building. We had $250,000 that was planned for programming and design study. That got pushed, just like this got pushed, because we didn't feel like we were confident in the revenues coming in to pay for them. So we would begin this July. We'd put this in the budget, assuming you adopt it, you agree with it. We begin the study process in the July 1 year coming up.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. I did get ahead of myself. I skipped that one and had jumped to the security improvement. So now I'm going to go ahead and go to the Uptown Department Relocation. This is a study to look at the space that may be vacated in the courthouse as we move forward with the Sheriff's Administrative Building. We want to make sure that we are able to utilize that freed up space in a most efficient manner. So very similar to the study that for the county office building, this $200,000 would be in conjunction with moving forward with the Sheriff's Administration Building to see how we can use that space that is vacated by the sheriff staff once they're in their own facilities. And then finally, in general government, our last project, this is a project from our MIS folks to upgrade our phone system. Our phone system is from 2002. We've been able to upgrade and patch it along as we go, but this would be a complete overhaul. We have about 800 end users. And from a funding standpoint, you may notice on the screen where it says BL or other, we are looking at potentially combining this project with another software project that we're going to talk about down the road in inspections to be able to kind of go at the same time from a bank loan standpoint, very similar to how we do at our vehicle replacements. So before we leave general government, are there any questions about those particular projects? Seeing none, we will move to public safety. So our first project in public safety is the replacement of our dog kennels at the animal shelter. This particular project is kind of an area at the shelter that we had hoped to hit on as part of the renovation project. It's an area of concern because we have been given a pass by our state inspector. We have some issues with the cages there, and they were kind of giving us leeway because we were doing the renovation project, and they're still working with us since the project's kind of put on hold. Our plan right now is to hopefully combine this with the RFP that we're putting out moving forward, and to be able to kind of knock this project out while we're finishing up the renovations. Our next project is our EMS capital replacement. This is the standard placement of money that we put in the EMS fund every year. This can help with vehicles. This can help with equipment. But basically, at this point in time, We don't necessarily have any particular set capital items, but we review those as part of the annual budget with the EMS Oversight Committee. Randy Gentry and his folks will put together a list of primarily it's going to be vehicles for replacement, and the Oversight Committee will determine if it's appropriate time to go ahead and replace those vehicles. The third project is the Sheriff's Administration Building. This is one of those projects that we did push off last year due to the fact that we didn't understand exactly the impact of COVID and what it was going to have on our revenues. The first year, 21-22 is a planning year. We will be looking to use that $250,000 to do our planning, engineering, or any other type of study work, with 22-23 being the year, if everything falls in line, that we would be looking to do any type of construction. That will probably be a multiple year time frame once we turn over some dirt. But it is our intention as we move into the spring budget process to move this project along, because we know it was a high priority last year. We just ran up against COVID. Our fourth project is the replacement of radios at the sheriff's office. Several of the sheriff's department's radios at the end of December of 2019 reached their end of life, which means that it's going to be very difficult at all to replace them, to upgrade them. So we would like to move forward with replacing those with some newer models that will thus extend the use of those for a longer period of time. This is pretty standard in the public safety world. Any technology that they have will eventually, the life will turn over and they will have to be replaced. So we're looking to go ahead and knock out quite a few of them in this upcoming budget. This is a particular item that on its own probably does not make the CIP threshold, but once you loop in as many as they're going to need, it doesn't take long to reach 120,000, thus making it a CIP item. And then our fifth project on this list is an unmanned aircraft, or better known as a drone. This will allow the sheriff's department greater ability during large-scale events, as we've seen recently with a lot of the public displays that we had over the last year or so. A device like this will come in great handy with the sheriff's department to be able to crowd control, keep an eye on folks, and that type of stuff. Next is our air handlers at the detention center. This is one of our multiple year projects. This would be the third and final addition to replace all the air handling units at the detention center. We've been trying to do one a year, and this will be the final one in that process. Facility improvements at the detention center. This is kind of a new item, but not new. We decided as a management team to treat this one very much like we treat our county office building facility improvements. Instead of looking at individual projects each year, we decided it may be more appropriate to just set an amount every year, just like we do at our building facility here, and then allow the folks at the detention center, they have their own maintenance and facility staff determine the best route for that funding. So what we've done is just went ahead and set up right now as a starting point, $100,000 a year. And then we will probably evaluate this amount during the budget process. So I would imagine some years it'll be a little more than 100 and some years it'll be a little bit less, but we felt like they know the facilities better, and to just go ahead and set up, an annual funding stream just makes more sense from a management side. And then the last two projects on the public safety side are the replacement of boilers and chillers. We have tentatively scheduled those kind of in a way to take up the CIP spot of the air handling units as we move forward. But we're looking at the boilers in 22-23 and then the chillers in 23-24. The boilers are going to help to replace some 30-year-old models. And I believe the chillers the chiller in 22, 23, 24 will actually help with redundancy and will provide a backup. So instead of running 2, we can run 3, which would be more cost efficient. And also, if one of the first 2 happen to go down, then we don't miss a beat by having the 3rd chiller in place. So that is our public safety list. Any questions on public safety? Seeing none.
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, yeah, just real quickly, thank you. I'm just wondering if you could comment on the different, while we're going with bank loan on something like the admin building and the sheriff's capital reserve on the others. And that's a question that will recur in the future when you're reporting. If you could just comment on the decision-making process that gets us to the bank loan as opposed to another funding source. And so I won't repeat that question, but if you could note that when you're going forward, when we're talking about loans. Thank you.
Yeah, so on the bank loan situation, we talked about the centralized phone system and the software. Those are going to be your typical bank loans that we can just basically solicit proposals from banks that here within the county. They're going to be the easiest option. They don't require us to go to the LGC. They don't require us to bring in bond counsel. They're going to be the cheapest way for us to go out and to get a loan and to spread that cost out over multiple years instead of trying to tackle it all in 1 year. On the sheriff's administrative building, technically, when I say a bank loan, that's a bond. But when we talk about the term bond, we're talking multiple millions of dollars, very similar to what we're going to discuss next Monday with the lobs involving A.G. Cox Middle School. So in that case, when you're looking at a $5.5 million project, it could be closer to 6 by the time you actually put all the pieces together. It makes more sense for us to go out into the larger bond market than it would be to just go get a local loan from here within the town. So this way it allows us to spread that cost out even further because as of right now, there's no way for us to be able to tackle a $6 million project directly out of fund balance or out of operating funds. On the Sheriff's Capital Reserve, that's the reserve that you all created when we look at our federal inmates. Each year when we finish our audit, we are tasked to come back to you with a calculation of how much over budget we were on that revenue. And if you want to move that money into the reserve was designed to tackle capital improvement items. So we try to make sure that those projects that are eligible for the capital reserve are on the CIP. And then there's a step-by-step process. So if we do come to you and say, we want to use the sheriff's capital reserve for a project, then you all will have to take that additional step to approve it. And so you have the option of using that as a funding source or regular operating revenues. So right now, from a financial standpoint, we try to look at all the different buckets to make money stretch as far as it will go. And so that's why at this point, we recommend which route that we recommend.
Thank you very much.
And I don't see any other hands.
All right. And again, to Commissioner Albright's question, you may pick a source today as approving the starting point of the CIP. By the time we get in budget, we may end up going down a totally different route.
Brian, it looks
Mary
like
Perkins Williams now has a hand up. Mary Perkins Williams now has a hand up.
I think she's
All right, I was trying to unmute myself or whatever. Brian, you said something about the federal prisoners for the sheriff. I didn't think we know when we were going to get when we were going to have federal prison. How do you know when to budget based these numbers based on how many prisoners we get?
So Commissioner Perkins Williams, every year when we do the budget, we do sit down with the detention folks and we go over their numbers. We have, in essence, a calculation based on a predetermined amount of inmates because we do not know how many inmates we are going to get. We typically do get more than the allotment But from a budgeting standpoint, it's better to set that number at a predetermined spot than to anticipate what you may get just depending on crime. COVID had an impact on the number of inmates that we received, but typically that number is less than what we typically do receive. And that's what we use in calculating how much we are above budget that's available for the reserve as we complete our audit. And as Scott alluded earlier in the meeting, we do plan to present the audit in the mid-February meeting. And at that point in time, we will know to the penny how much we were above or at budget on that revenue, and then what steps we can take forward on that reserve.
Brian, let me add to that. So on the federal inmates, the sheriff's office budgets to have on average 35 inmates. So where the capital reserve dollars come in for the sheriff's office, that 35 inmates might create $1 million in revenue that helps go against the overall detention center budget. It's really not, we're not making money per se. The general fund is still, as I keep saying every year, paying for more than the far majority of all the expenses. Where the sheriff's capital reserve fund comes into play is that when they have more than the 35, if that is the budgeted number, let's say on average they had 50 inmates in the current year. So there would then be excess revenue above and beyond the 35 that then, once the audit is presented, like Brian's talking about, will come before you on the 15th, we will know that as of June 30th of last year, how much, hopefully how much excess federal inmate revenue they have, and that goes in that fund. And I guess to be totally transparent in the matter, if you look on the slide, again, we have the detention center air handling units, which is the third phase of these units to go into place at 600,000. Then you talked about the boilers, you talked about the chillers. That is, from our perspective as management team and staff, we're saying that we propose the best use of those dollars, those excess dollars, is to meet these needs at the detention center for these capital projects. The sheriff has stood before you. I can't speak for her, but I can speak what she said in the past. She doesn't necessarily agree that her excess dollars should be used on these type of capital projects. But if they're not, then there's even more general fund dollars that have to come from somewhere to pay for these projects. She may want to use those dollars to buy vehicles or to replace bulletproof vests or to do radios or so on and so forth. But again, if they were truly, if the dollars they were earning were truly above and beyond any general fund dollars overall that was paying for the detention center, I think she'd have a stronger argument. But these are costs that are occurring that, again, from a cost center that does not pay for itself.
All right, thank you.
So we will move on to economic and physical development. In this category, we only have one project. This is our inspection project, inspections permitting software. We had a system in place since 2009, and we feel that it is time to upgrade and replace that system. That was something that is going to be more departmentally friendly and end user friendly with the public. This is a $750,000 project. And from a bank loan standpoint, we would probably wrap this in together with the replacement of the phone system and do one software type bank loan, hopefully from a bank here and within the county. But this would give us a greater ability. And being it's a 2009 system, it's probably time for us to take a hard look at some type of upgrade or replacement of what we have in place, especially as inspections have increased even during COVID. We want to make sure that our end users are having a smooth process as we go through the inspections process. Any questions on this? Moving to human services. Went too fast. Here we go. This is a project that you've seen before. This is the medical records area. A couple of years ago, we moved our software into the Epic model. By doing that, it freed up space within the health department. And the folks at the health department would like to use that space since it's available. to renovate it into usable office space. We've decided this year to look at it in two parts, one part for 21-22 for $150,000, another part for 22-23 for $175,000. But this is one of those rare cases where we do have the space available. We just need to upfit this particular area. And this has been an area that, as we have moved into the budget, as numbers have tightened, that has been cut. So this will be another look at this project to see if we can move it forward. Our next project in human services, which is actually in our second year, 22-23, is a replacement of our mobile dental safari unit. I'm sure you guys have seen this unit around the county, especially at our schools. But this, as it stands today, is a 23-year-old vehicle. So we are looking ahead and planning and trying to find the best route to look at replacing it moving forward in 22-23. This is a particular case where there is some revenue opportunity if we can get it out. COVID has put a hit on this particular operation, as it's hard to see school kids when school's not in session. But hopefully in those future years, we will be back to some sense of normal, and this will be running back at full steam. We do receive Medicaid cost study revenue. And that may be a potential source. That's why you do see on your list where it says current revenue / fund balance. Technically, when we do receive our Medicaid cost study money, it is restricted fund balance. There's a small list of items that's available for spending, and this being one. So that may be a potential source to help us alleviate the need on the general fund. Next is our Human Services Center expansion study. This is another study that we want to take a hard look at over at our Human Services building to see what steps that we can take to hopefully consolidate more of our DSS staff in one place and not have them in two locations. The study helps us to determine the best use of money before we come back to you with a larger dollar amount. This will probably be somewhere in the ballpark close to the Sheriff's Administration building in terms of cost. So we want to make sure that we come back to you with a good, solid number before we move forward on any type of expansion with DSS over at the Human Services Center. Any questions on human services? If you do look in your packet, DSS has provided you with some photographs of their space issues currently at the Human Services and at this facility here at the county office building. Is kind of a justification of their need to move this study forward to look for more space.
I would like, not necessarily now, but later in another meeting, hear a report on the mobile dental lab for the schools. We haven't heard from that in a long time. I don't even know how many students we've served and are serving and that sort of thing, because I was so much in favor of it when we started it, and I hope it's still going on kind of gangbusters. So maybe somebody can come back with that at another meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Ward. We will set something up.
Thank you.
So next on our project list is our cultural and recreation. This primarily is one you've heard before. You've heard some good news here recently on this project as well. It is not directly reflected on our CIP in line with the recent news that you've heard, so I'll still give you the spill on the project, but this is the gymnasium at the Alice Keene District Park. This first year is looking at planning dollars to move this project forward from an engineering and planning standpoint. And the 2 years that you have on here, the 23, 24, 25, and 24 and 25, those dollars actually add up to the recent news that we have heard that we are moving this forward as a special needs project through FEMA. That total project was roughly $17 million, with $4.5 million coming as a local match. from the county. We're hoping to get some of that local match funded through the state to help ease some of our burden. We were able to get the project submitted in time in January. We had a review of the project with the state emergency management folks. They gave us a very positive rating, and then they kicked it up to FEMA. And I believe there's going to be a June timeframe when we should hear back some feedback from FEMA on whether or not this is the project they would like to fund. So as it sits in your CIP, it is more of your standard gymnasium. Even though we have moved this forward as a special needs gymnasium through FEMA, but we're hoping to use some of the same money that we have here in the CIP to fund the FEMA portion if we are awarded the project.
Brian,
And I think James is on the line, and Scott may have some more comments if you have any specific questions.
yeah, Brian, I was going to ask maybe if the chairwoman would allow James or Alice to give a brief update where we are in the process. I think Brian alluded to some of the review process as we move forward. If we could just give them a moment just to tell us where we are. It is a large dollar project, so just want you to hear where we're at.
Yes, please do.
Yes, good morning, Chairwoman and members of the board. Just real quickly, and Alice is on the line too. I'm sure she'll hit a point if I miss something. We have moved forward with number one, the current CIP has the scaled down version. Tim Corley, Alice and I went over to Greene County last year and pretty much did a tour of their current facility. This was not a special medical needs shelter, but it was the gymnasium. So that's kind of what the current alignment that Brian just went over shows us. During the past few months, we've had a great opportunity. We listened to the board directed us to look for other revenue sources, and we think we found something that really helps us marry something that's very much needed here in our community. That's a special medical needs shelter. So we have just now submitted to FEMA as of last Thursday a request for a building resilient infrastructure and communities grant through FEMA to help marry both the gymnasium and the special medical needs shelter into one very substantial and versatile building out at the Alice F. King Park. So we feel like this works real well with the funding that's currently recommended, and certainly if we get this funding, we may need to come back with you and talk about the timing. We're hopeful we get funding in June. We'll have about 3 years to expend those funds. But right now, things are looking favorable, and we'll certainly be bringing that back to you. So welcome any questions you might have of Alice or me.
Commissioner Huggins, may I ask?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you both. And Brian, thanks for presenting on this. The 250 that we've got in this year's proposed budget, that's for what's that actually going to go to? And forgive me, when I think I'm one of the ones that requested that we look at other revenue sources. When I'm hearing the I guess the bigger upfit and the bigger plan, I'm still seeing that it's a pretty significant ask for coming from the county. It's still in the $4 million, and I guess at least in my view, when I was thinking of additional funding sources, I wasn't necessarily thinking that we would expand the project to bootstrap it onto something bigger. I was thinking of ways that we could reduce the overall burden on the county, seeing as how we have tremendous needs in other areas. And I think some questions have been raised as to whether or not a gymnasium ought to be at the top of the priorities where it's situated, and accessibility with cars and things of that nature. So I guess I still have a number of questions about the project and whether or not we're in a place where we want to commit to spending $4 million on it. But I guess just, Brian, if you could go over what this 250 is for, and then if it is a slope to expending $4.5 million if we get the grant from FEMA, what that's looking for our commission 2 to 3 years out in terms of what we're committing to.
So on the 250,000, this may actually be more of a Tim question from the engineering side, but this is to get our planning underway. If we are in the event that we are going to move forward with the project with FEMA. And I do want to add that the 4.3, I believe, is the actual match. We are hoping that the state will kick in some of their dollars to help lower that amount. So I don't foresee it being a whole 4.3 if we are awarded the project, because I think the state wants to get that FEMA money pumping through the state, because we were more ready than the other projects. So I think the state sees that as very favorable. So I don't think it'll be 4.3, but at this point, I can't tell you if the state's going to pay half or a third. I doubt they'll pay all, but I think we'll have to make that decision if we are awarded that grant.
So the 250 is in this, I guess, seen as a necessary expenditure to get us to that next question.
Well, part of the philosophy of the years past was that the board was approving the planning and design dollars to go ahead and do that, to have those in place so you could seek grant funding from other sources. What planning has done is gone after a much larger federal grant, but it's along the same line of thought. You were advancing the project even before the large federal brick grant came into play, to be able to start the process toward moving toward it, thinking that if we had firmer plans and design and so forth in hand, it might be easier then to land that grant funding.
Okay, and then I guess maybe a more appropriate time that I can raise this again, but also there are a number of recreation things not directly related, but we're looking at crumbling, the crumbling track and some other community areas where Hvac, which is used by the community, and some other places where we're looking to try to get more recreation activities in the community, and wondering if we're getting our best bang for our buck here. So that's just my continued question on this project. If a gymnasium is touching as many people as we can, or is that maybe is it a priority for the community? That's just my question, and I'll raise it later.
And to add to that, I think the discussion was that, sometimes we need a large facility for disaster time when we cannot use the schools. So that helped us to really talk about and push this along as a need and as kind of a priority. So in order to get us ready, we had to have some planning, and that I believe that 250 was to get us going so that we would be able to, as you said, to apply for the grant.
That's a good point, because as we open various shelters in the schools throughout Pitt County, then we get to the point where, say, a hurricane came, people are sheltering, and now the sun's back out, schools want to open, yet these people aren't able to quite move back into their homes or apartments or whatnot. We need a place where we can get them out of the schools so the schools can fully utilize the schools for school purposes. This shelter was going to be that consolidation point. That would be a non-school facility that we could consolidate 2 or 3 shelters into one location and then move on.
Thank you.
Okay, Brian?
Yeah, I was going to say Tim had popped on. I didn't know if you wanted to add anything.
Not necessarily. Again, the 250,000 was really a plan to get the plans ready. Most of the grant opportunities and monies that are available, like Scott said, do like to have those kind of shovel ready as far as the plans. So that was the intent there, was just to get the plans prepared and allow us to maybe even apply for additional grants. I believe this grant that James and Alice and I have been working on kind of popped up. This was on the CIP last year, and we kind of backed off of it because of the COVID issues. And so we are kind of in a different place as relates to where we were last year as far as the grant goes. But I still think it'll give us an opportunity to discover as we go along with the decision on the grant, also kind of where we want to go with the plan as far as if we want to continue down this path of the special needs or if the grants don't work out, maybe look at just a gymnasium type construction. Obviously with the special needs component, that certainly expands the scope of the project as far as what it needs to have at the facility, and in turn, the cost goes up. So a lot of things at play here, and James may want to expand even further on that, but I'll stop there.
And Commissioner McLaughlin has a hand up.
Commissioner McLaughlin? Commissioner McLaughlin?
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me, Madam Chair?
Yes. Go ahead.
As alluded to, James, I think, brought it up very eloquently. The FEMA need, the special needs, the recreational facilities, the medical needs in our community, especially as it relates to the Hispanic and community, underserved community. I think this will bring strong measures to getting grant money. And certainly we've been working on this project for a long time. I think that this project would in turn bring a lot to this community in what it's going to do for the total population. So if we can continue to reach out for grant monies, and with the necessary concerns that we're going to use this building for, I think that it may be a good project moving forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other hands up? Are there other hands up?
Not that I see.
All right. Continue on.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And I just want to point out, part of the CIP process is to have these projects in place. So if grant opportunities do come up, that we can jump on them. And that just helps our case, because we're not creating a grant. We're not chasing grants. We have needs, and the grants help to fund those needs. So I think this was a perfect scenario, having this already on the CIP, and then the grant popped up and we were able to just move into it pretty seamlessly.
Absolutely.
Our next group is our environmental protection. This is primarily all at the solid waste with John Demery and his projects. Most of these projects are going to be equipment based that you have probably heard in some form or fashion in the past. But our first one is our ongoing annual asphalt replacement at our convenience sites. As you know, we have 14 convenience sites. They get quite a bit of traffic, and that traffic beats up the asphalt and the grounds over there. So we have $150,000 for next fiscal year. We've identified Ayton, Falkland, Stokes, and Bethel as our four particular sites that we'd like to spend $150,000 on. That doesn't mean that next year we won't have a fifth or sixth, just depending on how wear and tear and operations and revenues look. But these are the four areas that we're looking at working on next year from a convenience site standpoint. Next, we have a dozer at the landfill. This would replace a 1992 model. So to get that amount of years out of one model is pretty impressive, but it is probably time that we look at replacing this one.
Brian, if you might want to pause, Chairwoman, we have a hand up for Commissioner Nunley, and then hand up Commissioner Perkins-Williams.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Nunley?
Madam Chair, I can wait until the end of the presentation. That's fine.
Okay. Commissioner Perkins-Williams?
Yes, I wanted to ask about when you started talking about the waste site. I'm wondering how far it is, because I used the one over by Lowe's on 10th Street, and the hose when you're driving up there is tremendous. I don't know where the site stops and where the highway starts, but the hose are just grand over there.
Commissioner, are you referring to the port terminal site?
Yes, I think that's what y'all call it. Oh, there, across from Lowe's, that street over across from Lowe's on 10th Street.
Yes, ma'am. So that street that runs down there to the site is an NCDOT street. That road is in very poor shape. I actually utilize that facility as well. It would help. We've asked DOT in the past to go in there and help us with that. It would probably help if the commissioners would maybe put a word in as well with them to see if that road could be fixed at their next round of asphalt work. The facility actually starts, as you turn in the drive, and that site as well does need some work. We've tried to prioritize all these convenient sites. They've been, a lot of them need work. We recognize that. So we're going to try to address it in a systematic way of trying to get the ones that need the most repair first. And you'll see that reflected in the CIP as far as future years. Our plans are to try to get all these sites back up to a good condition where we don't have to worry about them for quite a while. You may have, if anybody has seen the Winterville site, that's kind of our goal. We went in there and kind of redid that site. It looks very good and hopefully will be good for many years to come. We're also replacing a lot of the structures that the site attendants stay at. A lot of those are starting to fall down and have been there for a long time. And so we're also doing that as part of this CIP item.
Okay, I know the one that I'm talking about. The door is facing the river, and everybody is coming up behind him. So if it's rain, he can't see anybody coming up. I don't know. It's a bad place. But I appreciate you doing the one in Bethel too, because I've used that one. Depending on where I'm going, I take my trash. Thank you. You said it was Aiden and what else?
Aiden, Falkland, Stokes, and Bethel.
Okay. Thank you.
And I also want to point out, as we move into environmental protection of the solid waste, that all the funding for this is separate than the funding in the general fund. As you know, they have their own household fee, they have tipping fees. So there's a whole different set of revenues than we have previously discussed as part of our CIP presentation today.
Well, I appreciate it because I've gone to two of those other ones too, and the hose are bad. I don't understand the hose when you got to drive over. It really make your car tear up your car and stuff and knock it out of balance. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
John Demery has his hand up.
I'd like to comment. This year we're supposed to work on Port Terminal, Pactolus, and Welcome, I believe. And there might be one more that Farmville, I think. I don't have it right in front of me. Those are the ones we're working on right now. The house at Port Terminal is going to be replaced. The house at Welcome is scheduled to be replaced, and Bethel as well. So those are on this year's budget that we're working on.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? If not, then we will continue on. Our third environmental protection solid waste project is the replacement of a rubber tire loader. We're going to replace the oldest one over at the facility. And then in 23-24, we will probably be back to replace an additional loader to keep our loaders up to date. John, what year is the one that you're looking to replace?
It is it's our oldest one, and it is don't hold me to this, but I think it's about 5 years old, going on 5 or 6 years old.
Thank you. Our fourth project is the replacement of is actually the purchase of new roll-off trucks at the solid waste site. The roll-off trucks are at the landfill site are probably the workhorse vehicles of solid waste. And that's why you will see on the CIP that we have them up next year, and then we have 2 additional years over the next 5-year period that we would like to use these trucks for. But these trucks move When you go to convenience sites, these are the trucks that are picking up the containers and bringing them back to the facilities to be sorted out, depending on what type of materials that they're bringing. And also, we're going to try to take advantage. Volkswagen has a grant opportunity out there, and we're going to try to take advantage of that to help alleviate some of these costs so that we don't have to use as much current revenue in the solid waste fund to fund these projects. Next is our yard jockeys. These are the vehicles that move parts and pieces and equipment around at the landfill. We are looking to replace those. We'd like to replace our 2001 model, and this should put us back at more smoother facility efficiency at the facility. And then our last project is actually, we're getting way ahead of ourselves, but we just want to go ahead and put it on the CIP. This is a rubber tire excavator. We do have it out in our future years, within the next 5 years, at $250,000. So that being said, that's all of our projects at solid waste. Are there any solid waste related questions?
Yes, Brian, this is Commissioner Nunley. Madam Chair, may I ask?
Yes.
Thank you. Brian, we've been in discussions about getting containers at the convenience sites for glass recycling. I'm assuming that because it's not on the CIP, that the cost of that is under $100,000, and maybe John can comment on that, or if it's in the general fund request. But I just want to make sure that we're accounting for that that need in the community.
So before John jumps in, you slipped in there general fund. I just want to clarify that it's not part of the general fund. Yeah. So I believe John and Tim are working on that more ASAP the next future fiscal year and next 5 years, and that's why it's not listed on this list. But I'm going to let them explain to you that a little bit more.
We were waiting. I got an email last Wednesday or Thursday from the Glass Foundation that we applied for some money to purchase some containers. They were meeting Friday. I am hoping to hear something today about that. And then depending on how much funding we get during the budget, I will put in a recommendation to purchase additional containers. The containers are roughly about $4,000 or $5,000 a piece. Depending on my budget this year, I might be able to buy a few too this year, and hopefully in July we should be able to have all our sites completely. All of them would have a glass container at each site. But I'm waiting on the grant. I can't spend any money or they won't reimburse us.
John, how many actual containers did you apply for?
I applied for 14 containers for all 14 sites.
And we also, just as an FYI, we also reached out to the city. I know there's been some talk, asked them if they were interested in having a container placed on any site within the city. The Public Works facility was one that we thought might be a good location, but they declined that as well, just as FYI.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, continue on, sir.
Do we have any other hands or questions? Okay. So as Commissioner Albright asked earlier about our funding, this is a list of our funding sources, as you can see. And we do look at each one of these to analyze how can we maximize to get the most bang for our buck. We look at our unrestricted revenues. Not all revenues that we have available I can use on capital. So anything that's unrestricted, we like to consider that. Grant funding. If a department wants to move a project up, there's no better way than to find a grant. If there's a grant, especially if there's no match, that definitely helps us to move that project along and even help to move it up in the CIP, as in the case of the special needs gymnasium. Donations are always welcome. Fund balance is an opportunity that we have. You all have set a fund balance percentage. Currently, we do have the ability to look at fund balance as a source above that percentage. Just keep in mind as we move through the pandemic, how important fund balance may be just to have in the event that there's a particular revenue that does take a hit as we move forward. We did talk on our other capital reserves that we have set up. And we did actually go into a slight conversation on the difference between traditional bank loans and our larger limited obligation. And then, of course, if we do, if we want to go out for a larger sum of money, particular in certain areas, the general obligation bond is always an option. However, if we go down that option, we will have to go out with a voter referendum to get voter approval before we move forward with the bond. So we take all of those in consideration when we're deciding which categories to place which projects into on the funding side, and whether or not to even recommend it based on the funding. So it's just as much can we afford the project as in the project itself being on the capital improvement plan that we take in consideration.
Brian, on the general obligation bond, the financing, as I recall, that compared to the LOBs or the limited obligation bond, the general, which is voter, you said it's on the ballot, it's voter approved, typically tends to be a slightly lower interest rate because it does require the voters to back that via vote, correct?
Right. You will probably receive a lower interest rate because it's a more attractive form of borrowing money because you do have the voter backing behind you. You also, the voters are backing the ability to pledge the full faith and credit of our property tax to pay that loan in the event that we are short or dare I say even on default, we would have the ability to increase the tax rate to make that loan payment. So that does trigger typically a lower interest rate.
Thank you.
So at this point, before we jump into Pitt County Schools, who I think has joined our call, I will entertain any last questions about the Pitt County projects before I turn it over to Dr. Linker to go more into depth. And I think at this point I stop sharing and he starts sharing, but we will figure out the technical to make this work out. So are there any last questions?
Brian, there is the not recommended section on the agenda. Is that for later on, or are you doing that now?
Yeah, that's actually it's in the presentation after the school system and the Pitt Community College. We'll jump back into that.
Okay. Okay. While we're waiting for Pitt County to get on, we don't have, are they ready, Brian?
I can see Dr. Linker. He just, as I say that, he just stepped away.
Okay.
He's back. I'm back. I think if he unmutes, he should be able to take over. I think Kyle can have him set up to share his screen or his staff screen, however they're going to do it.
Okay. And then I don't see a break in here, but while we're waiting for him, do we want to take a break or anything?
If you desire to do that, we could do that and come back in 5 minutes, or we can
Okay.
Straight on.
All right. Let's come back for 5 minutes.
Okay, so 10:15?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Albright,
Here.
Commissioner Colson,
Yes.
Commissioner McLawhorn, Commissioner McLawhorn, can you hear us? Okay, I see him saying yes, but we can't hear you, but I see you're here.
Yes.
Okay, got you. Commissioner Nunley,
Yes.
Commissioner Ward, it looks like she is off camera. Commissioner Perkins Williams.
Here.
So we are just missing Ms. Ward.
I'm coming.
Oh, there she is. Everyone's present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good morning, Dr. Lincoln.
Good morning. Good morning. You ready for me to start?
Yes, we're ready for you to start.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right, well, again, good morning, Chair Huggins, commissioners, Mr. Elliott. We appreciate the time today to talk about the capital needs of Pitt County schools over the next several years. Also with me in the next room are Deborah Baggett, our finance officer, and then from facilities, you have Matt Johnson and Aaron Erickson, all of which I believe you're familiar with them. Okay. All right. So first, just what we're going to go through is the next couple slides are dealing with items that have already been approved by the county commissioners a couple months back. We're all in the phase, either bid phase or negotiation phase, or in the process of getting these next several items started. So just kind of a little recap for you on where we are with that one. So we have the school bus cameras that were part of this, and this is all goes back to like a $4.6 million fund, I guess, that was coming out of Article 40 and 42, the sales tax fund balance. So you can you'll see where that money is going here, and that the school bus cameras, that installation will occur in about a year from now. That is being bid out. It will be bid out probably next 2 months. You can see there, about having to get into new software packages and servers and things of that nature to make cameras work. So the process of doing that. Next, we have the Walcoats Elementary HVAC and electrical. Those items will be done this summer, summer of 2021. We are in the process of replacing several fire alarms. You remember over the last 2 years, we've already replaced, I think that number was 7 last year. This year, we've got 4 being replaced. They're at Bethel, Falkland, Rose, and Welcome. And those have already been awarded. You can see there who they were awarded to. And that is occurring or will occur this summer as well. And then we have just the camera system upgrades at all of our schools. You're looking at the changing all the old IP cameras, or changing to IP cameras and replace the analog cameras. That will include getting new servers installed as well. And that'll start in the fall when we come back to school and finish in the spring of 2022. Continuing on, where we've got the Aden Middle School replacement, the paving replacement for the bus loop. That'll occur next summer. Also, at Walcoats, we'll be replacing the fire alarm there next summer as well. And then you can see some more upgrades that'll be occurring next summer, summer 22, for our fire alarms. That's at Aden Grifton High School, Farmville High, and Wintergreen Intermediate. Any questions on those projects? Those are already been funded, and those are in the process of being done. Mr. Elliott, should I take questions as I go, or wait till the end, sir?
I'll defer to the chair on that, but I would pose a question. Does this expense the total 4.6 million, or a portion of it?
I think this is a total 4.6 million. Matt, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Yeah. We'll take questions as we go.
Okay.
And do we, Brian or Janice, do we have any hands up?
I don't know.
Don't see any hands at this time.
Thank you. Move along, sir.
Yes, ma'am. The next item is part of the LOBS 2021 funding package. That, again, this has already been approved by the county commissioners, and that's really only one project for us, and that is the A.G. Cox Middle School project. You're aware that this was funded several months back. We are that's a $12.25 million project where we'll be replacing the 1936 wing, which is the front area of the school, which also houses the media center and the office area. We will be adding, and I'll show you a picture in just a second, more classroom space, redoing the office area and the media center as well. you can see this is a 22-month project, and we should be starting next week. We hope to get some equipment out there and start getting shovels in the ground, so to speak. So that'll happen and be done the following Christmas of 2022. This is one of those projects where we'll have kids on campus while we are moving forward. So I think that actually adds a little bit of time to it. If we go to the next page, you can see there's what the floor plan will look like. Everything in blue is going to be new. You can see on the bottom right-hand side, you kind of see two buildings that look alike. That's going to be a first and second floor in that building. It's because it'll be a two-floor building over there. The other areas in blue are walkways that'll be enclosed, covered and enclosed. And you can see on the far left, you'll see the admin unit. That'll be that's kind of where the new library, where the current library is sitting.
Building for PCC. Are we saying there's capacity within article?
Am I good?
Can you hear me now?
So on the left, you'll see the unit admin. That's where the current media center is. So that's will be the new admin, and that'll be the front of the school. That's what the new school will look like as far as the floor plan goes. That also will have obviously new queuing lanes for parent drop off and bus parking and staff parking as well. All right. Next, this is the next set of projects are really this list is created of going back from starting with the 2016 LOBs that we had. That first list we put together. Some of those items are still on this list, plus the last 2021 DPI facility needs survey that was turned in just a couple months back. I think it was done in September of 2020. These projects, we're kind of just spreading these out. This has not been formally approved past the first year of where we are. The Board of Education will also see this proposal again today. But these are not in any funding that's been provided for roofs or bleachers or painting. So I'll go into that detail as well. So for next school year, the 21-22 projects listed. The first is just a chiller system overhaul at 3 schools. That'd be Wintergreen, South Central, and Northwest. The directions go in there, get a little more detail on which chiller it is, but you can see about $135,000 that need to be replaced there. The next 3 items plus 3 on the next page are all dealing with House Bill 90. Okay, so which if you remember, we talked about this several years ago. House Bill 90 was the class size compliance, the class size reduction bill that was put in place probably 3 years ago. So all of these are dealing with that, plus just growth in the county, in certain areas of the county. So we'll talk about that. Creekside, about $5 million. That will include 12 classrooms to replace 12 modulars as well, or to replace 6 modulars plus 6 new classrooms. That'll be 12 total classrooms. We're going to Creekside. Eastern, $3.3 million is dealing with class size, the House Bill 90 class size compliance. That's 8 classrooms. Elmhurst is 4 classrooms. Again, House Bill 90 is here. And I'll come back and reiterate about House Bill 90 in just a minute. On the next slide, you see, again, they're the House Ridgewood, W.H. Robinson, and Wintergreen are all dealing as a result of House Bill 90 plus some mobile units we're replacing. But that total of that, all those House Bill 90 the House Bill 90 class size compliance issues is $24.5 million. A couple years ago when we first presented this, it was about 21 million, 22 million. Obviously, things have gone up in the last couple of years. If you remember, also 3 years ago, there was a discussion of a state bond for school construction, public school construction. That original bond had about $21.5 million in it for Pitt County. The last bond that was discussed, again, none have passed, none have gone out, but the last bond that was discussed only had $15 million for Pitt County. So even with the bond, we're still anywhere from up to $9 to $10 million short of just following the House Bill 90, the class size bill that came out. So that's really what we're looking at. That's really priority one for Pitt County schools. That's the first thing we're going to have to look at as we move forward. Those 6 schools plus some chillers, which are going to need to be done. Okay, and then also for next year, Mr. Barnett,
Dr. Hunter,
yes, sir.
before you go to the next slide, I think Commissioner Perkins Williams has her hand up.
Yes, ma'am.
I think she's muted.
I'm sorry they had remuted me. Thank you, but my question deals with some sides before that involving safety and school safety. When you said you were putting in cameras, is that for all of the buses?
Yes, ma'am. Those are inside cameras. For all of the buses, not stop arm cameras. That was a law that came out at some point. This is just for the cameras inside the bus. And those will actually be automatic. Once you pull into the bus loop, they can automatically upload to the school servers. That's every bus. Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. And the other question that I had involving safety, I'm very interested about children's safety. The fire alarm. I think it was about 3 or 4 before you got here. Fire alarms and fire safety things. I know that there are some old schools over here, and the fire alarm, does that mean that you've already done the ones over here? Because the schools that you had on here are newer built schools, if I'm correct. So I want to know, does that mean that these real old schools that's been up for maybe 40, 50 years, they are already done?
I do not have the list in front of me of this. We did 6 or 7 last year. I don't have that list in front of me, unless Aaron, you know off the top of your head. But we have done. This will get us to about a little over half or 20, about 20 of our schools will be updated.
Well, see, what I was looking at was the school, and these are newer schools that you are putting in the fire alarm systems. And the longer you wait on the older schools, I'm thinking it'll take even more money, because you look at a school like Pactolas and what else is old? Bethel, Belvoir Elementary. Belvoir Elementary has been there for 100 years, I guess.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a little bit when you see the half lifespan of some of these buildings coming up. But Matt, or Aaron, you there? You know when Bethel or Belvoir was actually done, and where that is in the replacement cycle?
Belvoir's fire alarm was done last summer.
Okay.
That's what I want to know, because that's a real old building.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Williams, what we've done is we've prioritized the buildings based on the age of the fire alarm system in it, not necessarily the age of the building. Because upon the insertion of fire alarms in the buildings, the school system has been updating those and replacing those as it's gone along. And we all know that the fire alarm system is not going to necessarily make it a 50-year lifespan of a building as technology changes, as code compliance changes. So as we continue to move forward and as that continues to grow, we have to go back and look at, depending on the age of the actual system, not necessarily the building.
All right. Thank you. Because is this being publicized? Because I know I would get some questions as relate to folks' children. That's what I was trying. Another reason I was asking that. Why wasn't any, is this a publicized event?
I mean, I don't know that we actually put it out. I know the school itself knows that they're doing a fire alarm replacement, or we did one last year and that kind of thing. So our schools can actually help that with their actual student body and parent concern that, hey, this was done last year, or we're scheduled for this year. That kind of thing is mainly the way that it's publicized.
Okay, because I do know that, but we haven't gotten to that yet. There was some issue about Billboard and Paving, I think, in some emails I received. All right, thank you.
Okay. I think we were finishing up AG Cox, going into, we just finished up House Bill 90. And the next section should be proposed fiscal year 21. There you go. Thank you, Brian. And this is going back to, on a yearly basis, we get $1 million for capital improvements. I think last year was $1.33 million. This is actually addressing that list, and I've got a chart on the next slide that'll break that down to you. But and that's really how we paint and do some other things within our buildings. You'll notice this year it's actually $6 million, and you're going to see why as we get through there, what the request is and why it's jumped up. And you can see the fire alarm systems. We're requesting additional money for the fire alarm system from $100,000 to $145,000. Also, the cost of vehicles from $25,000 to $31,000. Then a couple new items at the very bottom of the page: science labs, as well as some athletic facility ADA compliance issues we're going to need. But the big issue right in the middle of the page is the roofing problems we're having. In the past, we've spent about $440,000, if you see that right in the middle of the page. And then if you look just to the left of that, you'll see $4.6 million. That's actually being requested for our roofs. That is going to actually affect, the biggest thing is J.H. Rose High School is going to need about 80% of its roof replaced. And that's probably close to $2 million, I would guess, Aaron, if I'm right. And then also A.G. Cox, Aiden Griffin High School, Aiden Middle School, Epps, Conley, Farmville Central High, and Farmville Middle, Grifton, Walcoats, Welcome, Pactolus, and Bundy also are going to need parts of their roof replaced. So I think in the presentation, you actually see those schools listed there for you. So you can see we have, in addition to Rose, you have another 12 schools that are going to need some roof things looked at very closely. So before I go to the next year, any questions on that, specifically that one slide there that's on that request there?
Chairwoman Ann Huggins, can I ask a question on the roofs?
Yes.
Dr. Linker, does the school system have any type of schedule or CIP that shows obviously you have the location, the age of the school, but do you show the age of the roof, the condition of the roof, and do you have any type of phase plan to know between now and the next 10 years out which roof needs to be replaced? Rather, it looks like all this is hitting us all at once at $4.6 million.
Yes, we do. Aaron, would you like to take that?
Yes. We have a plan. It's by what's called a roof section, which is typically a wing of a building, and it shows when it was installed, the expected life expectancy of that section of the roof, and then when it would need to be replaced. And then we monitor based on existing condition, number of leaks we're seeing. Some schools outlive their roof expectancy by 5 to 6 years. Others are missing it by 1 to 2. We're well past the warranty phase on all those roofs, but if it's a 20-year roof span, some roofs are showing age and needing it in a 16 to 18-year lifespan. Others are lasting 25 to 30, just depending on the conditions of that building sees related to wind, sun, things like that, tree coverage. But we do have a plan. As far as the roofs go, though, we receive about $440,000 to $450,000 a year in roofing, and we would need to look at that number is not necessarily keeping up with those needs. We're looking at a number closer to $750,000 to $800,000 a year in order to maintain and not fall behind going forward.
So is the 440 part of the capital 1, 2, and 3 $1 million allocation we give you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I guess it'd be easier for us if we knew we needed to raise the $1 million to $1,250,000 or something, to be able to allow you then to move forward like that rather than getting hit with a $4.6 million roof menu of roofs. Be it easier for us budget wise.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it would need to go to about 1.8 from the 1.3.
So Scott, are you asking, should we get a report saying, okay, we have 9 schools with roof replacement within the next 5 years or 2 years or whatever? Would that help us in and planning and budgeting, looking at and keeping up with the repairs or the condition of our school.
Yeah, that's where my line of thinking is headed.
Okay. So, Dr. Lincoln, do you hear?
Yes, ma'am. We can do that.
Okay. Thank you. You may continue.
All right, moving on to the following year. And again, this is just the items that need to be addressed over the next several years. We just divided these out. In some cases, based on where we are with the building, based on growth we're seeing, but these have not been actually approved or put in order by the Board of Education. So we're just kind of putting these as placeholders the next 5 years, just to, as you said, Mr. Elliott, just to give you an idea of what's on the forefront. Okay. First, D.H. Conley, construction of a new 2-story building in the back of the building next to the other 2-story building we have. That would actually move the media center and then also add some classrooms. We'd also convert the media center into some additional classrooms. It would also allow us to renovate the old 1969, the original building, the 1969 piece, as you can see there, with 35 classrooms, including CTE and science lab space, which is actually the front couple hallways of the building, 100s and 200s of that building. Generators, we've seen over the last several years with our hurricanes that we need some generators, specifically at GR Whitfield and Grifton, and also additional one at Facility Services, which is kind of where our district operations center is housed during those kind of those storms. And then that's that year. Then moving on to the next year, you can see 23-24. You have Grifton, which is a K-8 school. Basically renovate the 100 wing and the 200 wings, which is constructed before 1970. And you're going to see that the idea of everything is actually, 50 years or older on this list over the next several pages here. So that will include multiple classrooms, admin area in the media center and the cafeteria, as well at Grifton. Hope Middle is the only one that's not the 50-year-old or plus building. You've got basically just the growth in that side of the county is obviously we've all seen the growth over there with the number of houses. So just 8 new classrooms in that general area is what we're seeing over the next 10 years in that part. North Pitt, renovate the original building, very similar to what we just said at D.H. Conley, which is again 30 classrooms, the CTE rooms and science labs, admin areas, as well as the gym and locker room. Again, same as that part of the building, just like D.H. Conley. Moving into 24-25, the Pactolus cafeteria area, plus replacing of a couple modular buildings that are out there as well, and just change that. The cafeteria, as you all been out there, I know Ms. Perkins Williams, you've talked about that with me a couple times about doing some work in the cafeteria as well at Pactolus. And then something I think we really need to start looking at is our outdoor athletic facilities. In most cases are not ADA compliant, don't meet any ADA guidelines. I know we've removed some bleachers, added a few bleachers, but I think in our budget we have about $50,000 a year for bleachers. And one set of bleachers is, even inside, that only does about half of a middle school gym, $50,000. So doesn't come anywhere near actually replacing or fixing up the bleachers at, say, you look at Aiden Grifton or Conley. If you've been out to Conley recently, you can see the size of the bleachers and the size of the school don't match. And then, of course, all the other high schools have some areas as well. And this is not all football, but it's other outdoor sports as well. Moving on to 25-26, I think that's going to be the next slide. Some Aiden Middle, the electrical work, replacement of the main switchgear so we can get more capacity there, well over $1 million. And then come back to Chicad, the phase 3 piece, which would actually be the demolition of the old 1929 site that still sits out front. And if you remember, Chicad still has I think it's a 12-unit mobile unit that's been there at least since I've been here, a lot longer than that, but renovate, to add 2 additional classroom wings, 16 more classrooms in that area, plus the outside ball fields as well. Next, does that take us? Okay, that takes us to the 5 years. This last slide is really just an idea, as you mentioned earlier, Scott, of just the half-life of some of our buildings. And you can see all the buildings there that have 50-year-old sections or more. I think I've shared this slide before in the past. So you can kind of get an idea of how old the buildings are, what areas need to be renovated, things we'll be looking at. I'm not going to go through all those. That's really just for your information, so you can have that, Mr. Elliott, and then kind of see where we are. But also, we'll get together and get the roof organized and get that to you as well. Additional questions, Chair Huggins?
Are there any hands raised?
None that I see.
Okay. No, I don't have any, Dr. Lincoln.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, also. So next we have Brian, do you want to go back to the not recommended or other considerations, or do we want to wait until after Pitt Community?
I would say it looks like Dr. Rouse is ready to go. I'll ask Dr. Rouse if he would like for me to control his presentation or if Rick Owens will be controlling it.
I think either way, Rick has it prepared to present if necessary.
Then I'll let Rick share his screen and you guys can take over when you're ready.
Thank you. First of all, good morning, Madam Chair Floyd Huggins, and also to the members of the Pitt County Commissioners, and also to Mr. Elliott, the county manager, as well as the county staff. We certainly appreciate the opportunity today to talk a little bit about our projects that we would like to present to you. We also thank you for your ongoing support of Pitt Community College and the funding of the necessary facilities and programs that we have here at the institution. Today I have with us also Chair Gary Evans and our Vice President Rick Owens, who will present this presentation. We also appreciate Commissioner Ward's service as liaison to the PCC board. She's been steadfast in her support and being at our board meetings and understanding what Pitt Community College is all about. And last year we were in the planning phase of talking about a joint meeting between the Board of Commissioners and the Board of Trustees at Pitt Community College. However, we had a little thing called a pandemic that quickly changed our focus for a while, but I like to keep that on the radar as we look forward to once we come out of this pandemic to kind of have the two boards to meet so that you can get an update of what Pitt Community College is doing. This past year has been challenging for everybody. It's been challenging also for Pitt Community College. It's been challenging for our students, and we have made the best of it that we could. Back in March of last year, we pivoted to the process of what we call remote learning. We never closed during this pandemic. We were open, but we were operating in a different mode. We operated remotely and was able to continue to educate and empower our students. During the pandemic, we also were concerned about our students that were less prepared for college education. They did not have the infrastructure at home, whether it was a computer that was adequate or whether they did not have internet connectivity. All of these things were of a concern as we switched to remote learning, but we were able to issue out hotspots to those students as well as laptops. We also increased our Wi-Fi on campus. We did all we could to assist with those students. But we know that it is imperative that we get students on our campus so that we can have the in-person training for those that may be lacking the appropriate infrastructure. Also, we've continued to support our workforce by continuing to have various workforce development programs. We're increasing and adding new programs as we go. And we're also looking forward to when we can bring all of our students back to campus. And at that time, we'll, of course, need facilities to work with those students. One of our major focus is to continue to work with the workforce and to help our companies to continue the phenomenal growth that we've seen in pharmaceuticals and other companies, and to prepare students and graduates to enter into those occupations. So as we prepare for that, we thank you for your support. And at this time, I'll have Vice President Owens to present our request. Thank you.
Good morning. We'll go ahead and dive right into it. You'll notice that the requests are similar to years past. This is just a brief overview. The one thing I do want to note is that item number 1 under the 2020, 21, 22, and then the item number 1 on the workforce technology building, that planning, the design cost there is only if the design is done separately from the workforce technology building. If we receive the full funding for, or LOB funding, or however we do it for that workforce technology building, the estimated cost of construction is about $17 million. Just a brief overview of the workforce technology building. We are still looking at about 56,000 square feet. The 18 million, as I mentioned, includes the 1.5 for design. The purpose of this building is shifting entirely to the labor demands that are part of the economic growth of Pitt County. It includes the flex lab space and training spaces that industry is asking for us, the increases in cybersecurity, simulation, game design, the sterols with the pharmaceutical, life sciences, advanced manufacturing. And it also allows us to expand the PCC, Pitt County Schools Technical Academy collaboration. As far as that building goes, it is serving existing industries and helps to encourage the growth and expansion of those. It does help to attract new businesses. There are some significant retirements anticipated within the next 5 years, especially in Eastern North Carolina, as we're seeing nationwide. In our current technical training facilities are at capacity. This includes the pharmaceutical space out at I call it the old prep shirt, but at north of the river, and then the facilities that are here on campus. We've just reached the point that it's like several of our health sciences programs where we're having to admit fewer students than are applying. And that's with the facilities running day and night for the most part. And then there is the critical need to train the existing and future workforce. As far as the economic development goes, the majority of the jobs that are being created require at least a minimum of some sort of certificate or an associate's degree. And these are the projections over the next 5 years of job growth in Pitt County that do factor in the pending retirement. So we're looking at roughly 2,000 jobs coming to the county that are going to need some type of associate degree or certificate that we can offer. Then diving in, we do still have the Leslie building roof replacement. This one is still estimated at roughly $200,000. Again, it's one of the 4 buildings, I think it is, on campus that have asphalt shingles. And those were put in on, I guess we're 25 years ago. So, and then the Rhetoric building chiller replacement. We are looking at possibly using some CARES funding for this. We're waiting for approval to see if that can actually be done. Part of that would be actually expanding and improving the airflow quality, and doing some UV light remediation to reduce the chances of COVID spreading within the building. The biggest thing is that the cost during summer, if this unit fails, we would have to bring in rental units, and those are pretty expensive. The HVAC controls upgrade. We still do have several buildings that are connected by dial-up for the building automation systems. So we're looking at getting these upgraded so we can fully tie in and work on the energy savings and utilization. If these flow like other buildings have, this will just about pay for itself in scheduling and energy efficiency.
Mr. Owens,
Yes,
Mr. Owens, may I interrupt?
Yes.
I want to say good morning to Dr. Rouse and to you also, and thank you. I want to ask, do we have any raised hands? Janice, Brian, any questions so far?
Not at this time.
All right, thank you. You may resume.
Thank you. The interior door lock replacement, we did complete the first phase of that one last year, and that took care of several buildings, but we do still have roughly 650 doors. That's down from about 1,000-ish that need to be replaced because they have the mechanical key, or the door locks cannot be locked from inside of the classroom in case something goes on. Again, these are a little bit more pricey than the home door lock systems just because of the ADA and the safety codes. But it would allow the employees or students in the classroom to secure it if there is a violent incident taking place on campus. The exterior door lock, similar reasoning. What we're looking at is right now, the only way to lock the exterior doors is in person. This would allow us to put in some automated systems. We would be moving to the pandemic helped us a little bit in this one, and moving to the model that we would move to with this one, where there are only a handful of doors that are entry only on the building. It used to be that when the majority of the buildings were built on this campus, it was, let's go with the shopping mall mentality. Let's create the doors as close to parking lots as we can. This would be a little bit of shift in the culture to where you would have almost like Pitt County Schools has done, where you've only got the one or two primary entrances that are protected a little bit. But then this system would allow us to, if there is something going on, to go ahead and lock the building down. But it can also tell us on the exit doors if those doors have been propped open, or if it's late at night, we can check remotely to make sure that they hadn't been left open or unlocked or anything like that. Then just a quick overview of what we are looking at as far as campus expansion goes. We are underway with the Eddie and Joe Allison Smith Center for Student Advancement. Those bids back in October came in significantly high. Steel tariffs, uncertainty with the pandemic. There were a huge number of factors that came in on that one. So we're doing some redesign on that building, but do anticipate starting construction on it later this year. Then you can see over on the right side of the screen that future home for the Workforce Technology Center. The placement for that one is getting it right on Reedy Branch Road, kind of on the edge of campus. That way the individuals who do need that short-term training can come in, access the building without having to trudge through the traffic that is associated with our normal curriculum program. And then on the far left, you'll see a welding technology building. That one's not even included in this because it's a little bit far out. We're still not sure, looking at those, we're still not sure what the future brings with state bonds and what the funding models there will be. Honestly, I'm just hoping that we'll get a state budget this year. But hopefully the new legislatures, the new folks will be able to work together and we'll get a little bit of movement on the bond funding there as well. And with that, I will not hold up any of your time. I will open the floor for questions.
Do we have any?
There are no hands raised on the screen.
Okay. Well, if there are no questions, Dr. Rouse, Mr. Owens, thank you for your presentations.
Thank you for allowing us to bring this to you today, and we appreciate all your support.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Have a good day. Okay. Are we back to you, Brian?
Yes, and I'm getting my screen set back up. And actually looking at our presentation, we did jump the gun a little bit on our order, but I think it worked out in the end. You do have in your presentation, just in case you do want to look at it on a year-by-year basis, the projects that Dr. Linker went through. We do have them lined up by year in our traditional CIP format so that you can see all the different projects for each year. Same with Pitt Community College. They are in your presentation in CIP format if you wanted to look from year 1 through 5 of those projects, which actually is a perfect segue, having them going ahead and present. Our next spot on our presentation is our funding of those particular type of projects on the school and community college side. And where this is a little bit different than the earlier list of funding mechanisms. If you look, you still have your unrestricted revenues, but then we start talking about our restricted sales tax. These are going to be our Article 40 and 42 sales tax, where a percentage of that sales tax money we have to set aside for school and community college capital needs. We did tap into that particular funding this fiscal year. It has its own fund balance, and we did send Pitt County Schools about $4.6 million earlier in the fiscal year. That did not have any impact on our overall fiscal well-being. It's just money that we have in that particular fund balance, and with them having smaller capital projects that aren't necessarily on the level of going out and acquiring bonds like A.G. Cox Middle School, it just makes more sense to use that fund balance from time to time to knock out some of those projects. So we took that opportunity to go ahead and do that earlier in the summer. And as Scott asked, they're still in the process of spending that money down right now. And I think Dr. Linker went through the projects that they have underway. Our second restricted revenue is our Article 46 4% sales tax. This is just an additional pot of money that the voters approved a few years ago in Pitt County. Since we kind of started this process, a lot of the other counties across the state, just about every election, there's a new county that comes on board with the Article 46 money. But this is just another source of revenue to allow us to further look at those school capital needs. Then we still have our grants and donations. We have our regular fund balance, reserves, and then we have the bond process if we want to, as we're about to jump into hopefully here in February on our limited obligation bonds. And if Dr. Linker really touched base on the House Bill 90 projects, I'll just interlude and tell you all that if as we move into that discussion, we may have to look at that last bullet point on the general obligation bonds. If we're looking 24 to $30 million of projects, if we're unable to secure any type of funding from the state bond that was $21 million prior to, well, the discussion of it was $21 million prior to the pandemic. So we're waiting to see if those discussions pick back up as we have a new General Assembly coming in. But it is a lot deeper conversation than just listing out the projects that you've seen today. If we are in a place where we do have to move forward with House Bill 90, there may be some other characteristics that we may have to look into just beyond the financial impact to make that money spread around to all the different projects.
Brian, if I can jump in, talking about that last bullet, the GO bond, there's pros and cons on that. If you put that on a ballot, and these are statutorily required requirements for House Bill 90, and the voters vote it down, but yet you still have to meet that brick and mortar need, then the county would be, to some extent, the county's hand could be forced and be required then to go the lobs route. So then you would be taking an action against the quote unquote will of the voters. So in some respects, if you don't think it's going to pass a voter vote, it might be better to go the lobs route. Just saying.
Scott, I want to ask if I'm thinking that the discussion last week on the legislative conference talked about putting something on the ballot that would explain what this sales tax going to be used for, that would help voters understand why a yes vote and what that yes vote means.
Right. So I know Guilford County was talking about that. They've had the Courtesan Initiative, I think, on their ballot 4 different times. And part of the constraints in the legislation when the General Assembly gave counties the authorization to put the Courtesan sales tax on the ballot is you can't really explain what you're going to use the Courtesan for, like if you're going to dedicate it towards education or, brick and mortar needs. It just says basically, do you approve a Courtesan sales tax, yes or no? So I think what the goal of that item was to be able to allow more flexibility in asking the question. Now, we've already asked the question. We got the voter approval, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. So we're good in that respect. Honestly, what we could use is another Courtesan on top of the Courtesan we have to meet, because you're talking about $43.3 million total between Pitt County Schools if you go to the 24.5. That's just the House Bill 90 projects. That's not including all the other projects Dr. Linker listed. And then with Pitt Community College, their workforce technology building at $18 million, 18.8. That's 43.3. So just want to bring that up.
And also, Scott and Brian, Dennis, I would think that when we have this discussion with our legislators on Friday, I believe that I hope that we will look at all of these capital needs and when we talk about what we want their help on as pushing for monies to come back to Pitt County, that we will really stress these things to them when we meet with them on Friday.
Exactly. Yes.
Are there any last questions?
Get a hand up for Commissioner Albright.
Commissioner Albright?
Thank you. And thank you, Chairwoman. Just following up on what you said, I believe what we're talking about here is, wasn't it last year that we were asking that we not be given these unfunded mandates again? And I think that's a great idea to push this question on Friday when we meet with our delegation. It seems like that voice was not heard at all. If we're being asked to do something like this and with no funding sources other than what we got.
Well, in terms of the capital school needs, that's always been historically since the 1940s, I think, the county responsibility. And that was traded for something way back then, 80 years ago. I forget what the trade-off, the counties, the roads. I think we used to do roads back in the 1930s and 40s. And then there was a trade-off where counties then became responsible for the capital school needs, and the state then took on road building and maintenance responsibility. So historically, we've always had that responsibility, not only for the brick and mortar construction, but also their maintenance thereof of those facilities.
What am I missing? I'm not quite getting this. I mean, it seems like this is somehow different than us taking care of a roof and those kinds of needs. When the state is telling us to add buildings to accommodate a lower class size, that seems to have gone beyond what is normal for our what we should be expected to do in terms of building, taking care of our athletics fields and those sorts of things. Many of the items which were on the school's budget, but it seems different when the state tells us to lower class size, and then we must build buildings to accommodate that mandate.
I think that creates a great argument to say, hey, General Assembly, create a statewide bond package to address this need to help us. I agree.
Mm-hmm. Well said, Commissioner Albright. Where are we? Brian?
So next is our not recommended projects. And this is the one I was telling you guys earlier. It's not recommended because we think we can include the dog kennel replacements on the bids that we're going out on the animal shelter to complete the project. So technically, we're not recommending it, but we're still trying to move this forward. So this is one of those procedural not recommends, but we're still looking at the project. And then today, you should have received an email from Kimberly. This came in after we had printed out the presentations and the packets, but we felt like this is a new item that we needed to start hitting on the CIP, especially as we've talked more and more about recycling. That was a big part of the budget process last year, a big reason for why we increased the household fee. And then obviously we started off this fiscal year having conversations about glass recycling, but our partnership with ECVC, we partner with them on the recycling side, and we also help them out on the capital side. And what we did not want from ECVC is the same thing that we've asked to not happen with the school system, is for a list of projects to all of a sudden show up, and there's a long bill behind them for us to fund. So we've met with ECVC within the last 2 months, and we've kind of put them on our CIP. And we were able to get some final numbers last week, but these were the 5 capital projects that ECVC is seeing over the next 5 to 10 years. And starting with our baler, this is one of their main pieces of equipment that helps to bale and to crush and to consolidate the recycling that they do. We're looking at roughly $800,000 replacement, and I believe this is the original baler from back in the 90s. Next is a compactor, which is right under $30,000 to $29,000. This is another piece of equipment, not as old as the baler, but a big part of their operations over at ECVC. Unfortunately, they were unable to get us a quote on their scales, and this is the scales that the trucks drive across, but I do not think the scales number will be anywhere in the ballpark of the baler or the compactor, but it's still quite a bit. And then finally, just some trucks. We have a roll-off truck and a front loader that they're looking at replacing. We may be able to handle some of those replacement needs as we replace our existing rolling stock at the transfer site. Talking to John, there may be an opportunity for us to pass down one of our vehicles and let them use it based on the amount of work that they would need the vehicle for compared to what we need it for. We feel like that may be a viable solution. But from a CIP practice, it is smart for them to go ahead and put this on the list. So these were the 5 items that you may be hearing more about from ECVC in the next few months, and definitely part of next year's CIP. We're going to add this to the environmental protection section so that you all will have a heads up of future projects that we may need to look at funding a portion of.
Brian, there's a hand up for Chairwoman Huggins for Commissioner Nunley.
Yes, Commissioner Nunley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Scott, this might be a question for you and maybe and the entire management team, Brian. One of the things that, if it's possible in the workshops that are coming up with budgeting, I'd like to get a little bit deeper into ECBC operations. Maybe if we could explore, you know, where they are. I mean, they're obviously employing people in our community that are, you know, need jobs, and we need to be, you know, supportive of that. But I'd like to see, you know, what these employees are being paid a little bit. Maybe we can look into if we are, you know, we're leaning on them to do a lot of work, and the issue with the glass recycling and some of the other things. I'd just like to see if we maybe as a team can just look a little deeper into that relationship to see if it's where it needs to be.
Sure. And the county has a contract with ECBC for the MRF operation. We have a lease on the equipment. And all the equipment is listed in our asset inventory list. So we insure it. We actually have ownership of it. So that's why we've come to the conclusion that we need to be ready when the time comes to know how to have it replaced. There's also a lot of provisions within the actual contract between Pitt County government and ECBC that requires them to share all their financials, all their operating metrics and so forth with us. And we really have, we've had a discussion with them and actually had a meeting with them about that specifically. We've started receiving those even to a higher level than we received in the past. But we can bring a report to you to share that with you. And we realize that at the end of the day, we're going to pay for these things, whether ECBC were to theoretically go out and buy a baler or a new scale or whatnot, because they're going to up the tonnage fee that we pay in recycling, which we obviously had a major increase this year. So, but we can bring those to you and let the Board of Commissioners have a better understanding of what those metrics and those financial measures are that they're operating under. I mean, they are now revealing to us how much money they're getting for all the different commodities they sell. We have a report on the number of employees with disabilities. So a lot of the stuff is coming in. We may want to expand what we're getting as well.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, that just dig it a little deeper, and so we can have a better understanding. I think that would be helpful.
Any other questions? Then the second bullet point, and Mike Taylor if there's any specific questions, can jump in. But we have talked quite a bit here recently about a broadband project. We put an RFP out there. We were waiting to see if we could get some CARES Act funding from the state. And then since we started, there have been some other broadband opportunities that have come up within the county. So even though we do not have a project listing for broadband, it's a capital need based on the infrastructure, based on the cost. And we wanted to make sure that we included that within this process for you to take a look at and review. But I do think we will be bringing more additional information about broadband between now and May when we get into budget workshops.
I think that's a great idea. As the association, has included broadband as one of the top priorities. So I think we should also add it, or as you said, as you stated, one of our CIP projects. So yes, more information.
So we've already had our presentations by the school systems and the community college. So we're at our part at the very end where there's any additional questions or direction that you would like to point staff towards.
Okay. Do we have any hands?
I do not see any hands.
Okay. Well, if there are no hands raised, then we're to take that as staff presentations or accept it as presented. And I would also like to say that I hope that the citizens will look at the budget schedule that the county manager put forth at the very beginning, and that the citizen will look at that and get involved in the individual department budgets. So when we come to the public hearing, that they will be a little bit that they can engage at all along and not just at the end when the departments have put together a budget. So if some citizens have questions about the school board with the school system and some of the things that they are doing or not doing or not including, more safety as Commissioner Perkins Williams alluded to, that I think this would be a time for the citizens to raise those questions, and then when they get to us also. And I think we're at the point now, Mr. Manager, are we to accept the motion to adopt the plans as presented?
Yes, and now let me defer to Brian a little bit on this. So obviously the CIP will become an element of their overall operating budget. At least the first year for the 21-22 year of it will be incorporated into the adopted budget for July 1. So Brian, we've never taken action at the workshop before, not to say that we couldn't adopt a preliminary CIP. What's your desire today?
At this point, is the board would be giving us the A-OK to take the information that was presented and use that as part of our draft budget.
Okay, so a motion would be fine, would be in order. Again, the official version of it would be via the actual adopted budget for at least funding that first year of the 10-year period. So if the board is comfortable, you could make a motion today in that regard.
Okay. Commissioners, that is what I'm asking.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I will make a motion saying that we approve what has been presented for them to move forward and work on to bring back to us for final approval. Is that what we need?
Yes, ma'am. That's fine.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have a second?
Commissioner Nunley has his hand up, and then Commissioner Perkins Williams.
Commissioner Nunley?
I'll second, Madam Chair.
Okay, it's been moved to second that we give staff directive on moving forward with the plans as presented today. Madam Clerk?
Yes, Chairwoman Floyd Huggins,
Yes.
Vice Chair Fitzpatrick,
Yes.
Commissioner Albright,
Yes.
Commissioner Colson,
Yes.
Commissioner McLaughlin,
Where did he go?
Commissioner McLaughlin, can you hear us?
Yes.
Commissioner Nunley,
Yes.
Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, do we have any other business that we need to attend to at this time?
You've completed the agenda.
Beg pardon?
So you've completed the agenda.
Oh.
So no.
Okay, I believe so, and we are ahead of schedule too.
Yes.
Madam Chair, before we entertain a motion to adjourn,
okay,
can I take a second to thank Denise and Kelly for putting all this together?
Sure.
They're the backbone of our CIP little group that we have, and thank Tim for reviewing it with the departments. And then I wanted to thank Kyle for keeping us on track on today's Zoom call.
Okay. Well, I want to thank all of you for keeping us all on track and guiding us through this process. Commissioner Ward, I believe. I see.
I'd like to make a motion for adjournment.
Commissioner Nunley.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We adjourn, Madam Clerk.
Yes, Chairwoman Floyd Huggins,
Yes.
Vice Chair Fitzpatrick,
Yes.
Commissioner Albright,
Yes.
Commissioner Colson,
Yes.
Commissioner McLaughlin,
Yes.
Commissioner Nunley,
Yes.
Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We're now adjourned.